Hello, everyone, and welcome to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. I'm Elric Merlin, and this week we're visiting an estate known as the Hosoi cluster, which contains some fabulously beautiful creations drawn from the cultures of both China and Japan. And I'm joined here by Ayaka. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Elric.
Now, before we go any further, perhaps you could tell our viewers what your role is here and how things work here, particularly for people who aren't so well acquainted with the culture, and I'm certainly not, so it'll be a learning experience for me too.
Certainly, I'd be happy to tell you about it. I am general manager for our 4-sim cluster. We have 3 other general managers as well as various groups with managers who help run the Sims. We are a social cluster, home to various shops, especially Amiryu Hosoi's, who has all of the products that we're talking about today. And also we're host to a number of role-play groups from mostly Japan and other areas that come to enjoy the Sims and participate.
Well, it's absolutely gorgeous environment here. It's really one of the most stunning I've seen in World at all, actually, and it's really gorgeous. So perhaps you could tell us about the what you actually find in each of your 4 Sims.
Absolutely. The sim that we're on right now, China Sichuan, is Land of the Great Wall. And I'm sure that everyone knows the Great Wall of China. And if you look around us, you can see that Ame has built quite the monument dedicated to that culture. We also have Japan Chubu, which is home of the famous Japanese castle Matsumoto, and also to Kibatsu samurai clan, who protect our lands, as well as a samurai area and our onsen, which is a hot steam spring. We also have Japan Kansai, which is where our Hanamachi is, our Hosoi Mura Edo period Japanese town. We have a Geisha Okiya, which is where I'm from. We also have a Taiyu house called Tsukinoya, with mythical Japanese courtesan, as well as several other groups and people who join us there. And then we have Japan Kanto, which is where Hosoi Chiba, the store is, all of Amy's wonderful creations for furniture and lifestyle.
Wow, that's a fair amount. And not only that, you mentioned some names and concepts with which I'm not at all familiar. So hopefully we'll get to delve into those in a little bit more detail later on. Um,
Yes.
but in the meantime, there must be, with a place that's as amazing as this, there must be quite a story behind how they came to be. And I wonder if you can actually give us some insights into the how the different regions began.
I would love to do that. I wish that Ami was here to tell you herself, but just a little bit of history. Um, Amy heard from a friend about a wonderful place called Second Life where you could create and sell and buy items. And she began by building structures, basically a big building like structure that she could sell. And ever since then, she's been doing Japanese and Chinese themed items. And that's how the idea to recreate the Great Wall of China was born. Um, she basically built the Great Wall and tried to sell it in Second Life, but it's a very big structure, as you can see. You need an
Yes.
system to host it. So they never sold a copy of it, but they decided to leave it up in Second Life. And it was an amazing job to create the Great Wall. And as you can see, it makes a great backdrop for the island that people love to come and visit. It's one of the most well-visited tourist attractions in Second Life, and we quite like it. So that's how things began, and they've just developed out. I think as you build, you need more space and more sim clusters, and that's how our clusters came about originally to support the SOAR. And then they've sort of taken on a life of their own as people have come and joined the Sims and groups have filled it in with their personality.
Wonderful. Well, what we should do, I think, is to let our cameras roam a little over the marvelous structure of the Great Wall here, um, and then ask you a little bit more. are some really amazing panoramas to be seen from the wall itself, and it's well worth taking a good walk round, and that could take you a little while. Um, so perhaps you can tell us a little bit, Ayaka, about how this recreation of the Great Wall actually um, resembles the structure of the original.
Certainly, I would love to talk about that. Of course, it's an interpretation, so it's not an exact copy. It won't be exactly what you see if you were to go and stand on the real Great Wall, but we certainly hope that it is a good representation of it. Amiri started this project with the financial help of a real-life benefactor, using over 3,000 pictures from the original Great Wall of China, or Chongqing, as a reference, to build a sim-wide version of one of the most impressive historical structures that the real world has to offer. The real world version was built between the 6th and 16th centuries. It took a long time to build it. Started during the spring and autumn period of history to protect the northern part of China from attacks. In the
Mm.
category, so it was basically used for war to keep the Mongols and the Xiongnu attacks out. And in the category of trivia that you can use at parties, the statement that the wall is the only human construction, that the wall is visible from space, is actually an urban myth, but in Second Life, you can certainly see it from space.
That's interesting. Yes, right. And of course, the I suppose one fairly large difference is that the version we have here in Second Life is not quite as long as the real thing.
Not quite. You can actually walk all of this one in a very short period of time and enjoy it and bring friends. It would take quite some time to explore the real one. Um,
Yes, right.
I would love to. I've actually been there and spent most of a day exploring, and I think I probably got less than a mile. So,
Ooh,
as to
okay.
our interpretation of the classic construction, you can enjoy it on the China Sichuan Sim, where we are now. You'll land in our visitors reception area where we started and then walk across the bridge to one of the gates in the wall. And from there you can climb up on top of the wall and walk around and enjoy the full view just like we are.
And what a view it is. And I think there's actually something rather cool that if you happen to have your own completely empty sim and you like a
Yes.
really impressive piece of
You
construction on your sim, you can actually have a great wall of your own. Am I right?
indeed. It's not like the Golden Gate Bridge being for sale. We can actually sell the Great Wall of China. The wall is for sale. If you have a sim that has enough prims to be able to handle the whole thing, or if you'd like to capture the flavor of a part of the wall without the full thing, you can buy individual components of the wall as well. They are modify, transfer, and no copy. For more flexibility, you could buy the buyer's pack, though, that contains all 30 of the building elements that you can see here,
Oh
and
wow,
a raw
that's
terrain
amazing.
file as well, so you can set the entire wall up just as you see it, or in part.
Now, as we've had a look round the sim here at the Great Wall, there is one thing which really you notice instantly, and that is a giant Buddha just inside the wall. Can you tell me
Yes.
about that?
Isn't he lovely?
Absolutely. Very, very impressive.
Chinese Buddhism relates collectively to the various schools of Buddhism that have flourished in China since ancient times. Buddhism has played an enormous role in shaping the mindset of Chinese people, both their aesthetics, their politics, their literature, their philosophy, and their medicine. And we think that it's a very important cultural and spiritual icon. And for the people that come to visit the Great Wall, in our Sims, I think the Buddha is a favorite thing to visit. We often find people relaxing there and meditating, and I just think he's a wonderful part of the wall and the Chinese culture.
Oh, absolutely. It's as I say, very, very impressive indeed, and a really nice environment to come to, and as you say, to find some tranquility. In fact, actually, there are aspects of this whole set of four Sims which just have a wonderful, tranquil, natural feeling about them. Despite the fact that I'm sure, just like in real life Britain, you look at the landscape and it looks all sort of, well, the bits of it look all sorts of wild and what have you, but in fact we've been messing with our landscape for thousands of years. I'm sure that
Yes.
China is exactly the same in real life and that it's all been messed with for thousands of years. But there is a very uniquely Oriental approach to the relationship between different elements of the landscape, isn't there? Like how mountains and water relate to each other, and how the balance of the yin and the yang works to
Yes.
keep a landscape in harmony. Is that something that's
I think
evidenced
so.
in these constructions here as well?
I think so, and it's one of the things that first attracted me to The Sims. I've known Ame, our benefactor and builder, for many years now, and I've watched things develop here from a grassy plain into all of the amazing builds that you see. And I think in both Japanese and Chinese culture that there's a deep respect for the spirituality of nature and for the way that nature relates, and you see it reflected in all of the building. And one of the neat things about Ame and what she first said to me is it's all in the details. It's all in the little details that you don't necessarily notice. The shadows, the way the water plays with the mountains and the trees and the leaves and the seasons. And those are all things that are not only important to the build, but to the cultures and that make it very special.
Right, and it really looks like it as well, actually, because there is a feeling of balance about the entire environment here, which I think, quite frankly, you need to come here yourself to experience.
It's
Thank
it's
you
quite
so
magical.
much for giving us some really useful insights into the background here, and the opportunity to look at this wonderful environment. I think now that Safia is exploring another part of this gorgeous area.
That's right, Elric. I've come here to a beautiful fishing village, and I'm joined here by Liliana. So, welcome to the show, Liliana.
Thank you, Safia. It's good to be here.
Now, perhaps you could tell me what attracted you to the Hosoi cluster as a place to become involved with.
Well, originally, I had visited Japan a long time ago as a child and was just looking for some place to remind me of my childhood. Um, so I originally just took a peek around and happened upon the Hosai and fell in love with not only the people here, but the landscape as well.
Right, it is staggeringly beautiful. We're in the most wonderful place. So, what is your role here now?
Now I have joined the Yokia here. I am what's called a Shikomi, which is where you start out as a essentially a young maiden in the Yokia.
Right. And what will happen? Do you follow a kind of course, a progression?
Yes, after serving as a Shikomi, and I follow around the geisha and the Maiko and the Minari, watching them and learning from them while taking classes in order to move up through the rankings. My next ranking will be a Minari, which is kind of exciting.
All right. That sounds great. Now, we've come here to a stunningly beautiful place, and it makes me wonder whether this sort of area is purely for role play or if there are residential areas on the cluster too.
Well, this area is definitely, there is a lot of role play. We do have, a whole community for role players, fighters, and other Japanese groups, as well as it just being a whole general public area for everybody to come and enjoy. Almost all of the buildings, including the Matsumoto Castle, are residential areas.
Right. So, you can actually live here as well as play here. That's lovely to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you tell me more about the place where we're standing now, this little fishing village?
This fishing village was one of the first communities that were built for actual use. Over time, I know Ami tried to connect all these residential areas with all these little paths for you to walk through and enjoy the entire area. The paths will take you through all of the highlights that she's added over time. And it's always best to just come here and take the time to just walk through.
Right.
And enjoy the landscape for what it is.
That sounds fantastic. I really want to do that. And because it's certainly not the end of things to see here in the Hosoi cluster. In fact, there's so much that we hope we're going to be coming back for another show next season. But believe me, there are plenty more wonderful things to see in this show. And after a short break, we propose to show them to you. So don't go away.
Radio Real is an internet public radio station with multiple streams on the air daily. We play an extensive variety of music for listeners with eclectic taste, from early music to Victoriana, big band and folk, plus drama and special programs. For more details, visit radioreal.org.
The best things in life are free.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And I'm standing here in the marketplace of the Hosoi cluster, a group of 4 regions with a marked Oriental flavour. And I'm currently standing in the open marketplace, which is really the most beautiful Oriental bazaar, and each stall, each segment of the marketplace, perhaps I should say, is selling a different kind of goods. I'm joined by Liliana again, and Liliana, I'm hoping that you can tell me a little about this amazing place. I think setting up here, it really is an object lesson in why the online marketplace isn't good. You just wonder these buildings all around them, and you see so much fantastic stuff. I think each separate store has a different kind of good, doesn't it? Different kind of goods.
Yes, there's obviously different things for your home. There's things like screens, things like chests, place to sit, to enjoy a meal. And it's really great to come here and delve into the different products and see them and look around in just the area to help recreate this in their own SL homes.
Yeah, it gives the most beautiful settings to see the furniture and things actually set out. It's really very inspiring, gives you lots of ideas of what you could do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And now, I believe there's something, a footnote to all this, which is particularly interesting for us at Designing Worlds, because in a show a couple of weeks ago, we looked at people who are moving Second Life businesses into real life. And I believe that Amiru is doing exactly that.
And she is. Lately, she has really been using SL as a toolbox to create her new real-life company called My Oriental Garden. Mm-hmm. Because she's noticed people paying higher prices for high-quality items like her tea houses, she was thinking that the same people would also pay for real-life items. So she started with a range of pavilions based on her creations here in Second Life and built her company around them. Since about October 2011, she's already had 45 different people asking for quotes on prefab pavilions and villas.
That's
Her
wonderful. That's wonderful.
her next step is to actually find a builder who can actually build the pavilions so she can export them out all over the world.
Wow. That is really exciting. Can people find more about that out online?
Oh, yes. Actually, you can go to myorientalgarden.com and find out all about her company there, the information, as well as there's a YouTube video at youtube.com /user/myorientalgarden.
Fantastic. That'd be lovely to see this brought out into the real world, and I'm sure that people who are fans here of her work here in Second Life would be delighted to have an opportunity to see it in the real world as well. That's wonderful. Now, I think Elric has moved to the center of this marketplace, this bazaar, and has found something really rather special.
That's right, Safia. And here, right in the very center of the market, is a really beautiful garden. And I'm here with Ayaka, and perhaps you could tell us a little about it, Ayaka.
I would love to. The garden is the heart of Hosoi Chiba. It's the center of our Sims. It's dedicated to a friend that Ame lost in real life. Without the garden, we wouldn't have a market, and without the market, we wouldn't have the funds to support our Sims. So this is kind of the heart, the most peaceful area that's dedicated to our friends that supports us.
Well, that's really cool. There is a really gorgeous overall structure to the garden here, which places it on a number of different levels and identifies different areas at different levels, and there's the use of the rocks and the water. How does all that work? How is it, what's the fundamental principles? Perhaps you can give us an insight.
Doesn't that make it really so interesting to look at and to walk through? One of the most important things in Japanese garden design is the use of all of the aesthetic cues that you've just talked about, the water and the rocks and the flow of the design. Amy has spent hundreds of hours studying real-life designs and books and photos in order to recreate them. And I think she's done a marvelous job of drawing in the plant life and the shadows and the bridges and the various aspects of the garden that sort of create the whole picture. And as you can see, sort of has a Zen look to it with the way it's surrounded and how one part flows into the next part by use of the design.
And it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm really impressive. Let's look at some of the specific areas here, and one that does really draw one's attention straight away is this wonderful area next to us, which is a very much a Zen sort of sand garden. What's the official name for those?
It's a Zen garden. It's a
Okay.
Japanese Zen garden, and it's meant to be a traditional garden like you might see outside of shrines or before entering a tea garden. And also you will find them around many tea houses.
Well, that's interesting. And perhaps you could give us a basic introduction to the principle behind it, could you? Or is that too much to
Certainly.
ask? It might be a bit too much
No,
to ask.
not at all. Um, Not at all. There are certain qualities that you find in most cultural aesthetics when it comes to things like tea ceremony and mannerisms and garden design in Japan. Aspects like humility and mutual respect and the ability to live in a moment and experience what's beautiful about that moment in nature and in time with your friends. And I think that you can see those aesthetics in the garden if you just come and stand. Even if you're all by yourself, you sort of become, immersed in the magic of it, and you can feel the peacefulness of it, and it gives you a very humble sense.
Yeah, very much actually, and it's also very much a spiritual experience in many senses as well. And you mentioned the fact that you might find this type of Zen garden in the vicinity of a shrine, for example. And in fact, I believe that the area right in front of us here is a purification area, is that right?
That's right. Shinto shrines and also Buddhist temples, to some extent, are places of worship or dwellings. For Shinto, it would be for the kami, the Shinto gods. And there are sacred objects of worship that represent them, and they are stored in the innermost chamber of those temples and shrines. Before you enter the shrines, and there actually are shrines here as well, you would purify yourself, and you would do so by approaching just as we are here in the garden and using the bamboo ladle to cleanse your mouth and your hands before entering.
Okay. Now you mentioned tea a moment ago, and there is actually a tea room here, isn't there?
There is. One of the things that we practice here and we study is Japanese tea ceremony, rooted deep in history, and involves a lot of the similar aesthetics as we just discussed, humility and respect, and the observance of a moment. And tea gardens are often much like this, where you would enter and you would make your way through a solitary or Zen garden. You would purify yourself, just as we've talked about with the shrines, before making your way to the tea house and entering to enjoy the ceremony. The garden is meant to instill a sense of calm and a sense of peace, and the further you walk through the garden, the more you should feel surrounded with that peace and that calmness, and the water surrounding it just sort of creates a cool barrier that you cross over when you come into the garden, and you can just sit and watch the pretty fish and the lanterns. It's lovely.
It really is, actually. It's quite marvelous, really, and a wonderful feeling, as you say, of peace and tranquility. And the fact that it's actually at the centre of a marketplace is a really excellent contrast, in the sense that you can imagine that from the bustle of mercantile life you could just nip across the water and maybe do a little bit of Tai Chi, or you could just contemplate the world.
I think it really connects to the market, because this is the spirituality that all of her beautiful creations come from. So you can kind of see what inspires them and how they became so beautiful.
Absolutely. I wonder if there's any other areas here that we should talk about. Do you think there's anything we should particularly point out to our viewers at this point?
There are a few places in the garden. One of the coolest that you mentioned, of course, is the tea house, and there are a few areas to sit and just enjoy the beauty, but the Tai Chi in the middle is really cool, and you'll often come and see people meditating together or practicing in the middle. It's neat.
Absolutely, and I think really what we ought to do at this point is we should do a little bit of Tai Chi. I think that would be a really lovely thing to do, and see the Tai Chi area. And while we do that, we'll take another short break, and during the break we'll show you a selection of photos of the Hosoi cluster taken by Wildstar Beaumont. There is, of course, much more to see here, so enjoy the images and don't go away. Welcome back to Designing Worlds, where you find us exploring the beautiful Hosoi cluster of Oriental regions. And now we face something of a dilemma. We're in front of this gorgeous building here, but there's an upper and a lower part.
That's right. The lower part is actually beneath our feet, and it does contain something fascinating, but perhaps not for this show. Isn't that right?
Perhaps not. The club beneath the pagoda is called Kanigura, House of Treasures, first started to display a rare collection of shunga, a special place for special arts, which we periodically rotate like a gallery. Mm-hmm. The entrance can be found just in front of us here in the main square in front of the pagoda. Just follow the steps and immerse yourself in the sumptuousness of the space. You can sit for a while and enjoy the cool air and the beautiful works of art that surround you. Our first display is a connection of the finest shunga in Second Life. Shunga is a Japanese term for erotic pictures, most often woodblock prints, although it has its origins in China. Literally, it means picture of spring, which is a common euphemism for sex in Japanese culture. While this is significant, it is in fact a contraction of Shunkyu Higa, the Japanese name for Chinese sets of 12 scrolls depicting the 12 sexual acts that the crown prince had to carry out as an expression of yin-yang.
Wow. Well, as a way of progressing to the kingship, that certainly beats military service, I think. So I believe, though, that Shunga can carry, as well as the sexual imagery, it can carry quite subtle messages too.
That's right. Not only does it depict sensual and sexual scenes, it's also very symbolic of what was happening in culture and history at the time. Often the people who painted the paintings were not necessarily famous artists, although some of them became so and were. Many were peasants who painted these pictures for the pleasure of their masters, and in society they couldn't really speak their mind and say necessarily what was happening to them, or of course there would be strict penalties. And often you can find the symbolism of their lives and their plights in the art, in the colors and in the clothing and in the textures and the nature depicted. And I think that's very fascinating about it. Shunga was made in the 16th to 18th century by ukiyo-e artists, like we've just discussed, and it was the reserve of the courtier class. So it really was something that only the upper class looked at. So if you can imagine, it might have been quite the secret for some of the things that were in the art that may not have been noticed. Through the medium of narrative hand scrolls, sexual scandals from the imperial court or the monasteries were depicted, and the characters tended to be limited to courtiers and monks. So it was a way for people to speak out. And we feel that these paintings would add an authentic atmosphere to your traditional Japanese bedroom or sleeping area to evoke the desired mood.
Right. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. Totally fascinating. But as this program is what you might call a family show, I suspect, unfortunately, we'd better move on to the pagoda itself.
Yes.
Oh, this is gorgeous, inside as well as out. Can you tell us something about it?
Absolutely. The pagoda, this one that still stands overlooking the Hosoi cluster, is a very early structure. Amy says that she needs to update it because she's learned so much more now about building, and she knows that she could make it 10 times better today. She doesn't want to take it down because people still like it, and the structure is still an eye-catcher on The Sims. Once we had two, a red one and a brown wooden one. Some time ago, she removed the wooden one and created a new area for ama diving, which you can see on the Hosoi Chiba blog. And a few weeks ago, she complemented this area with a small harbor that is now the home of our ninja clan and our yakuza. But as you can see, the pagoda still stands tall and is such a beautiful addition. And I don't see what she's saying about improving it. Whenever I look at it, it just seems magical to me.
It's beautiful.
It really is, isn't it? And totally fascinating. But now, sadly, we're coming to the end of our show, with so much left to see. The theatre, for example.
Yes, it would be lovely to see a performance there. I hope we'll be able to do that next time. And there's the ama diving area where you can dive for pearls. And as you were saying, I think that's also the home of the ninja clan.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, well, that's plenty to look forward to there. A whole wealth of places and attractions still to come and see. So we'll be back next season.
Yes, and by that time, I think Liliana is going to have progressed in her order. In fact, you've got an exciting ceremony coming up tonight, I believe, Liliana.
Yes, I do. Tonight, I will be progressing into Minari status.
Right. So what happens there?
One of the coolest things about our Sims is our various groups, and ours, the one that Lily belongs to, is for geisha, for the study of the geisha's arts and their lifestyles in order to entertain the public here in Second Life, much like they would in real life. So Lily has been in training and taking classes to learn culture and language and arts and poetry and tea ceremony and many things, which will enable her to perform and teach and interact with the public. And that's one of the best things about our Sims. We have a variety of groups and entertainments for the public, no matter if you role play or you shop or you just like to come and relax and enjoy the beautiful architecture.
That's fantastic. In the meantime, if you want to find out more about the Hosoi cluster, you'll find a great deal of information at the website, which is Hosoi Ichiba blogspot.nl, and we're going to put that address on our website.
But now we've unfortunately come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank Ayaka and Liliana for their help in introducing us to this quite amazing place.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for coming. We very much appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for being on the show with us and for showing us around. Now, don't forget that if you want to see this program again, you'll be able to catch it over the coming week on the Treet TV Lifestyle channel and on the Designing Worlds page at treet.tv or on the Designing Worlds blog.
Next week, we're going to be at the Second Life birthday. It'll be another retrospective show, and the first of 2 visits of what promises, as we film this, to be an extraordinary event.
I'm sure it will be, but for now we must leave you and wish you fair winds and clear waters.
Fair winds and clear waters.
You